The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her rifle scope with practiced precision. Around her, a group of cocky Navy SEALs whispered among themselves, their voices carrying just enough for her to hear their doubts. They had requested advanced sniper training, but none of them expected their instructor to be a quiet woman who looked more like she belonged in a library than on a battlefield. "Think she even knows which end the bullet comes out of?" muttered Petty Officer Jake, earning snickers from his teammates. They were an elite unit, fresh from successful missions in Afghanistan, and their confidence bordered on arrogance. The idea that this soft-spoken sergeant could teach them anything seemed laughable. Maria had heard it all before. At 32 years old, she had spent the last 12 years proving herself in a field dominated by men who questioned her abilities at every turn. Her small frame and gentle demeanor often led people to underestimate her, which had become her greatest advantage both in combat and in training scenarios like this one. She said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, forcing the 8 SEALs to lean in closer to hear her. "Today we're going to work on precision shooting at extended ranges. The targets are positioned at various distances between 800 and 1,200 meters. She gestured toward barely visible markers scattered across the vast training area. Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes, the team leader, crossed his arms and smirked. "Sergeant, with all due respect, we've been doing this for years. Maybe we should start with something more challenging." His tone carried the unmistakable condescension of someone who believed his rank and reputation spoke louder than his instructor's qualifications. Maria simply nodded and walked over to her rifle, a customized weapon that had seen action across 3 different continents. "Of course, sir. Would you like to demonstrate your current skill level first? That way I can better understand what you need to work on." The challenge hung in the air like morning mist. Hayes felt the eyes of his men on him, and his pride wouldn't allow him to back down. "Absolutely," he said, grabbing his rifle and moving to the firing position. The target he chose was at 900 meters, a distance that would showcase his abilities while remaining within his comfort zone. As Hayes settled into position, Maria noticed the subtle flaws in his technique. His breathing wasn't properly controlled, his grip was slightly too tight, and he hadn't fully adjusted for the morning wind patterns. But she said nothing, simply watching as he took his shot. The bullet struck the target, but several inches off center. It was a decent shot by most standards, but far from the precision required for the scenarios these men would face in real combat situations. Hayes stood up, clearly disappointed but trying to maintain his composure. "Good shot," Maria said diplomatically. "The wind can be tricky this time of morning." She paused, then added, "Mind if I show you a small adjustment that might help?" Before Hayes could respond, she had moved into position behind the same rifle. Her movements were fluid and economical, like a dancer who had performed the same routine 1,000 times. She made minute adjustments to the scope, shifted her body position slightly, and controlled her breathing in a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. The shot rang out across the training ground, and through their binoculars, the SEALs could see the bullet had struck dead center of the target. What impressed them more than the accuracy was the speed at which she had achieved it. From the moment she touched the rifle to the moment she fired had been less than 15 seconds. "Lucky shot," whispered to his teammate, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Maria heard him but didn't acknowledge the comment. Instead, she moved to a different position and selected a target at 1,100 meters, one that was barely visible even with magnification. Again, the same fluid movements, the same controlled breathing, and another perfect shot. The training ground fell silent except for the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees. The SEALs exchanged glances, their earlier confidence beginning to waver. This wasn't luck, and they all knew it. "Sergeant," Hayes said, his tone noticeably more respectful, "where did you train?" Maria looked at him with eyes that held stories she wasn't ready to share. "Various places, sir. Would you like to try that shot again? I think I can help you improve your technique." As Hayes nodded and returned to his position, none of the SEALs realized they were about to learn from someone whose reputation in certain circles far exceeded their own. They had no idea that the quiet woman patiently adjusting Hayes's grip had once held a record that would make their most impressive achievement seem modest by comparison. Over the next 3 hours, Maria transformed the way the SEALs approached long-range shooting. Her teaching method was unlike anything they had experienced. She didn't bark orders or criticize their mistakes with harsh words. Instead, she watched each man carefully, identifying the unique flaws in their technique and offering gentle corrections that immediately improved their accuracy. Petty Officer, who had been the most skeptical, found himself hitting targets he had never been able to reach before. Maria had noticed that he held his breath too long before shooting, causing his aim to waver from oxygen deprivation. With a simple adjustment to his breathing pattern, his consistency improved dramatically. "How did you see that?" asked after nailing 3 consecutive shots at 950 meters. "I've been shooting for 8 years, and no one ever caught that breathing issue." Maria smiled slightly. "Sometimes an outside perspective helps. You're a natural shooter, you just needed to trust your instincts more." Her praise was genuine, and felt a flush of pride mixed with embarrassment for his earlier comments. As the morning progressed, each SEAL began to realize they were learning from someone exceptional. Maria's knowledge extended far beyond basic marksmanship. She understood wind patterns, atmospheric pressure, temperature effects on ammunition, and dozens of other variables that could affect a shot. More importantly, she could explain these concepts in simple terms that made immediate sense. During a brief break, Specialist Tommy approached her with curiosity. "Sergeant, I've been wondering about something. You mentioned training in various places. Were you deployed overseas?" Maria was cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. "Yes, I've done a few tours." Her answer was brief, but noticed the distant look in her eyes that many combat veterans shared. "Where at, if you don't mind me asking?" "Afghanistan, Iraq, some other places I can't really talk about." She continued cleaning her weapon, but detected something in her voice that made him probe further. "What unit were you with?" Maria paused for just a moment before responding. "I was attached to different units depending on the mission requirements." It was a diplomatic answer that revealed nothing while sounding cooperative. Lieutenant Commander Hayes had been listening to the conversation while hydrating nearby. Something about Maria's evasive answers intrigued him. In his experience, most soldiers were proud to talk about their service history, especially with fellow service members. The fact that she was being so vague suggested either classified work or something she preferred not to discuss. When training resumed after the break, Maria announced they would work on a more challenging exercise. "We're going to simulate real combat conditions," she explained. "Multiple targets at varying distances with time constraints and environmental factors." She had set up a complex course that required the SEALs to move between different positions, identify priority targets, and engage them in a specific sequence. It was the kind of scenario they might encounter in an urban warfare situation where precision and speed were equally important. Hayes went first, and despite his years of experience, he struggled with the time constraints. The pressure to perform quickly affected his accuracy, and he missed 2 of the 6 targets entirely. "The key," Maria explained as Hayes finished his run, "is to find the balance between speed and precision. In real combat, a quick shot that misses can be worse than a slower shot that hits." She demonstrated the course herself, moving with a fluid efficiency that seemed effortless. What amazed the SEALs wasn't just her accuracy, but her speed. She completed the course in nearly half the time Hayes had taken, while hitting all 6 targets with precision that would have been impressive even without time pressure. Her movements between positions were economical and purposeful, suggesting extensive experience in similar real-world situations. "Jesus," whispered Petty Officer, "she makes it look like a video game." As each SEAL attempted the course, Maria provided individual coaching that helped them improve incrementally. She seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how to push each person just enough to challenge them without causing frustration. Her teaching style built confidence while demanding excellence. By afternoon, the improvement in the team's performance was remarkable. Shots that had seemed impossible in the morning were becoming routine. The SEALs were hitting targets at distances they had never successfully engaged before, and their confidence was growing with each successful shot. During another break, found the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him all day. "Sergeant, I have to ask, you're not just any instructor, are you? I mean the way you shoot, the way you move, it's like you've done this in real combat situations." Maria looked at him with an expression that was both kind and guarded. "We all bring our experiences to our teaching," she said diplomatically. "But your experience is different, isn't it? Hayes interjected, joining the conversation. I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years, and I've never seen anyone with your level of skill. What's your background? The question hung in the air as Maria considered how much to reveal. She had spent years keeping her most significant achievements private, partly for security reasons, and partly because she preferred to let her work speak for itself rather than her reputation. I've been fortunate to work with some excellent mentors, she finally said. Good training and lots of practice make a big difference. It was another non-answer, but this time Hayes wasn't going to let it slide. There was something about this woman that didn't add up, and his curiosity was getting the better of him. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows when Hayes made a decision that would change everything. He had been growing increasingly curious about Maria's background, and her evasive answers only fueled his suspicion that there was more to her story than she was revealing. Sergeant Santos, Hayes said during a water break, I'm going to make a phone call. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Maria's expression remained neutral, but those who had been watching her closely noticed a slight tension in her shoulders. Sir, Colonel Mitchell is visiting the base today. He's an old friend and he knows just about everyone in the sniper community. I think he'd be interested in observing our training session. The other SEALs didn't think much of it at first. Officers visited training exercises all the time, and they assumed Hayes was simply showing off their new instructor to his connections. But Maria's reaction was subtle yet telling to anyone who knew what to look for. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and her breathing pattern changed slightly. 20 minutes later, a military vehicle approached the training area. Colonel James Mitchell stepped out, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was a legend in special operations circles, with over 25 years of service and a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. His experience included some of the most classified operations in recent military history. Hayes jogged over to greet his old friend. Jim, thanks for coming out. I wanted you to meet our instructor. She's been putting us through our paces today, and I think you'll be impressed with her skills. Mitchell nodded and walked toward where Maria was standing with the rest of the team. As he got closer, his casual expression began to change. Something about the woman seemed familiar, though he couldn't immediately place where he might have seen her before. Sergeant Santos, Hayes called out, I'd like you to meet Colonel Mitchell. Maria turned to face the colonel, and the moment their eyes met, Mitchell's expression transformed from polite interest to stunned recognition. His mouth opened slightly, and he stopped walking as if he had seen a ghost. Maria Santos, he said quietly, his voice carrying a mix of disbelief and respect that was unmistakable to everyone present. The use of her first name, combined with the colonel's obvious recognition, sent a ripple of curiosity through the SEAL team. This wasn't the reaction of an officer meeting a random instructor for the first time. This was something else entirely. Colonel, Maria acknowledged with a slight nod, her voice maintaining its characteristic calm despite the obvious tension of the moment. Mitchell took a few steps closer, his eyes never leaving her face. He said to the SEALs without looking at them, Do you have any idea who's been training you today? Hayes felt a mixture of excitement and confusion. We know she's an excellent instructor, sir. Her shooting skills are exceptional. The colonel let out a short laugh that held no humor, only amazement. Exceptional doesn't begin to cover it. He looked directly at Maria, who maintained her composed expression despite the unwanted attention. Should I tell them, or would you prefer to do the honors? Maria's silence spoke volumes. She clearly had no intention of revealing whatever it was that Mitchell knew about her background. The SEALs watched this exchange with growing fascination, realizing they were witnessing something significant but not understanding what it meant. Sergeant Santos, Mitchell continued, his voice growing more serious, holds the record for the longest confirmed sniper kill in United States military history. The shot that made her famous was taken at a distance of 2,147 meters in Afghanistan 3 years ago. The training ground fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop as the weight of Mitchell's words sank in. The SEALs stared at Maria with new eyes, trying to reconcile the quiet woman who had been patiently teaching them with the legendary figure Mitchell was describing. Was the first to break the silence. 2,147 meters, that's over 1.25 miles. Actually, Mitchell corrected, it was 2,147.3 meters to be precise. The shot eliminated a high-value target who was coordinating attacks against coalition forces from what he believed was a safe distance. It was a mission that saved countless lives and changed the course of operations in that region. Hayes felt his mouth go dry. He had heard rumors about this shot over the years, whispered stories that had taken on almost mythical status among snipers and special operations personnel. But the record holder had always been identified only by a classified designation, never by name. "But that's not all," Mitchell continued, clearly enjoying the shocked expressions on the SEALs' faces. "Sergeant Santos also holds records for accuracy under combat conditions, most confirmed kills in a single deployment, and she was the first woman to complete the Army's most advanced sniper course with a perfect score." Maria remained motionless during Mitchell's revelation, her expression giving away nothing. But those watching closely could see the slight flush in her cheeks and the way her hands had unconsciously clenched into fists at her sides. "Sir managed to say, why isn't this common knowledge? I mean, a record like that." Mitchell's expression grew more serious. "Because Sergeant Santos specifically requested that her achievements remain classified. She's never sought recognition or publicity for her service. In fact, most people in the military don't even know her name is associated with these records." The colonel turned back to Maria with an expression of deep respect. "Which makes what happened today even more impressive. You've been learning from someone who could probably outshoot anyone in this room blindfolded, and she's been humble enough to teach you as equals rather than talking down to you." The revelation changed everything about how the SEALs viewed the day's training. Every gentle correction, every patient explanation, every demonstration of skill took on new meaning when they understood it was coming from someone who had achieved things they had only dreamed about. The atmosphere on the training ground shifted dramatically after Colonel Mitchell's revelation. The SEALs looked at Maria with a mixture of awe, respect, and embarrassment as they recalled their earlier dismissive attitudes. The woman they had underestimated was not just any instructor, but a living legend whose achievements had become the stuff of military folklore. Maria finally spoke, her voice carrying a note of resignation. "Colonel, I specifically requested that my service record remain private for good reasons." Mitchell nodded apologetically. "You're absolutely right, and I apologize for speaking without your permission. But these men deserve to know they were learning from the best." He paused and looked around at the assembled SEALs. "What I will say is that Sergeant Santos has declined numerous opportunities for promotion and recognition because she prefers to serve quietly and effectively." Hayes stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely replaced by genuine respect. "Sergeant, I owe you an apology. We all do. We came here thinking we could teach ourselves more than you could teach us." "No apology necessary, sir," Maria replied with characteristic grace. "Confidence is important in your line of work, but it should be balanced with the willingness to learn and improve." Who had been the most vocal skeptic, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Ma'am, when I made those comments this morning about you not knowing which end the bullet comes out of, I was completely out of line. I had no idea who you were." Maria turned to face him directly. "Petty officer, you couldn't have known my background, and even if you had, your concerns would have been understandable. Experience doesn't automatically make someone a good teacher. What matters is what we've accomplished together today." Colonel Mitchell watched this exchange with interest. In all his years of service, he had rarely seen such humility combined with such exceptional skill. Maria's ability to deflect recognition while maintaining the respect of her students was a leadership quality that couldn't be taught. "If I may," Mitchell interjected, "there's another aspect of Sergeant Santos's record that might interest you. The shot that made her famous wasn't taken under ideal conditions. She was operating alone, behind enemy lines, with limited support and equipment that had been damaged during insertion." Leaned forward with interest. "What kind of damaged equipment?" Mitchell looked to Maria for permission to continue. When she gave a subtle nod, he went on. "Her primary scope had been cracked during a rough landing. She had to make calculations and adjustments manually, using backup iron sights and mathematical formulas that most snipers would struggle with under perfect conditions." The SEALs were quiet as they processed this information. They had all trained extensively with various equipment failures, but the idea of making a record-breaking shot with compromised gear was almost inconceivable. The target was a Taliban commander who was coordinating mortar attacks on a coalition outpost, Mitchell continued. Intelligence indicated he would be in the area for only a short window, and there was no other way to reach him. The shot had to be perfect on the first try. Asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What was the time pressure like? Maria answered this time, her voice quiet but clear. I had about 30 seconds from when I identified the target to when he would move back into cover. The wind was gusting and inconsistent, which made calculations difficult. But the biggest challenge was that there were civilians in the area, so there was no margin for error. Hayes felt a chill as he imagined the pressure of that moment. How do you even begin to calculate a shot like that under those conditions? Practice, Maria replied simply. Thousands of hours of practice in every conceivable situation, so that when the real moment comes, the calculations become instinctive. Mitchell added, what Sergeant Santos isn't telling you is that the shot not only eliminated the target, but did so in a way that caused minimal disruption to the surrounding area. The precision was so exact that civilians nearby didn't even realize what had happened until later. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. A small convoy was heading toward the training area, and Mitchell recognized it as the base commander's detail. That would be General Harrison, Mitchell said. I mentioned to him that I was coming to observe this training session, and he expressed interest in meeting Sergeant Santos. Maria's discomfort was more visible this time. The last thing she wanted was more attention from high-ranking officers who might feel compelled to share her story with others. As the vehicle stopped and personnel began emerging, Hayes made a quick decision. Sergeant, if you prefer, we can tell the general that training is complete for the day. Maria looked at him with surprise and gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it showed that Hayes understood and respected her desire for privacy. Thank you, sir, but that won't be necessary. I can handle one more introduction. General Harrison approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. He was known throughout the military for his direct approach and his appreciation for exceptional soldiers regardless of their rank or background. Colonel Mitchell tells me we have someone special training our SEALs today, Harrison said as he joined the group. General, this is Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, Mitchell replied. She's been providing advanced sniper training. Harrison's expression changed immediately upon hearing the name, just as Mitchell's had earlier. But his reaction was different. Instead of surprise, his face showed deep respect and something that might have been concern. Sergeant Santos, he said formally, it's an honor to meet you. I've been following your career, and I have to say, your request to remain in a training position rather than accepting the commissions we've offered has been puzzling to many of us. The SEALs realized they were witnessing another significant moment, though they didn't fully understand the implications of what the general was saying. The mention of offered commissions suggested that Maria had turned down opportunities for promotion that most soldiers would have eagerly accepted. General Harrison's presence added a new dimension to the already charged atmosphere. His comment about offered commissions revealed yet another layer of Maria's story that the SEALs hadn't known existed. The woman who had been patiently teaching them all day had apparently turned down multiple opportunities for advancement that any soldier would typically jump at. General, Maria replied with measured respect, I believe I can serve most effectively in my current capacity. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. I respect that choice, Sergeant, though I confess it's frustrated quite a few people up the chain of command. He looked around at the assembled SEALs before continuing. What these probably don't realize is that you've been offered direct commissions to Lieutenant Colonel twice, and you've declined both times. The revelation hit the SEAL team like a physical blow. Lieutenant Colonel was a rank that typically required 15 to 20 years of service and exceptional leadership qualities. The fact that Maria had been offered such a significant promotion and had turned it down spoke to achievements that went far beyond even the impressive record Mitchell had already revealed. Hayes found his voice first. Sir, if I may ask, why would someone turn down that kind of advancement? General Harrison looked to Maria, clearly seeking permission to continue. When she nodded slightly, he explained, Sergeant Santos has consistently stated that she prefers hands-on work with soldiers in the field rather than administrative duties that come with higher rank. She's also indicated that she believes she can have more direct impact on mission success by remaining in operational and training roles. Still processing the morning's revelations, asked, Ma'am, how many other records do you hold that we don't know about? Maria smiled slightly for the first time since Colonel Mitchell's arrival. Petty officer, I think we've covered enough of my background for one day. What's important is that you've all improved significantly during our training session. Colonel Mitchell laughed. She's being modest again, General. What she's not mentioning is that she's also credited with developing several new training methodologies that are now standard at sniper schools, and she's been requested specifically by special operations units for pre-deployment training. Which brings me to why I'm here, General Harrison said, his tone becoming more serious. Sergeant, I have a proposition for you. We're putting together a specialized training program for elite units from all branches. It would involve developing curriculum, selecting instructors, and overseeing training for our most advanced operators. The offer hung in the air as everyone waited for Maria's response. It was clearly a significant opportunity, one that would allow her to impact military effectiveness on a much larger scale. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm content with my current assignment, Maria replied diplomatically. I figured you might say that, Harrison said with a knowing smile. But this position would be different. You'd have complete autonomy over training methods, and you'd spend 60% of your time in direct instruction rather than administrative work. Plus, you'd be working exclusively with personnel like these SEALs who are already at an advanced level. Looked between the general and Maria with fascination. Ma'am, that sounds like an incredible opportunity. Why wouldn't you want to influence training on that scale? Maria was quiet for a long moment before answering. Sometimes the biggest impact comes from working with individuals rather than systems. Every soldier I train goes on to train others, so the influence multiplies naturally. But when you get too far removed from the actual training, you lose touch with what really works and what doesn't. Her answer revealed something about her character that impressed even the experienced officers present. Despite her exceptional achievements, she remained focused on the practical aspects of her work rather than seeking recognition or advancement for its own sake. Hayes stepped forward with newfound respect. Sergeant, speaking for my team, this has been the most valuable training we've ever received. Not just because of what we learned about shooting, but because of how you taught us. You made us better without making us feel inferior. The other SEALs nodded in agreement. Added, Ma'am, I've been through dozens of advanced training courses, and most instructors either talk down to us or try to prove how much better they are. You made us want to improve ourselves. That's exactly what good leadership looks like, General Harrison observed, which is why we keep trying to promote her. He turned back to Maria with an expression of resigned admiration. Sergeant, if you change your mind about the training program, the offer remains open indefinitely. As the afternoon sun began to set, the various officials prepared to leave. Before departing, Colonel Mitchell approached Maria one final time. I want to apologize again for revealing your background without permission, he said quietly. But I'm not sorry these men learned who they were working with. They deserved to know. Maria nodded graciously. I understand, sir, and I appreciate that you kept the details appropriate for the setting. As the vehicles departed, the SEALs found themselves alone again with their instructor. But the dynamic had changed completely from the morning session. Where there had been skepticism and condescension, there was now genuine respect and eagerness to learn more. So, Hayes said as they prepared to pack up equipment, any chance we can schedule follow-up training sessions? Maria smiled, the first completely relaxed expression she had shown all day. I think that can be arranged, sir, but next time maybe we can skip the introductions and get straight to the shooting. Laughed, finally comfortable enough to joke with her. Deal, ma'am, but I have to ask one more question. What's the most important thing you've learned from all your experiences? Maria was quiet for a moment as she secured her rifle in its case. That the most dangerous enemy is overconfidence, and the most valuable asset is the willingness to keep learning. No matter how much you know or how good you become, there's always someone who can teach you something new. As the SEALs drove away that evening, they carried with them not just improved shooting skills, but a new understanding of what true excellence looked like. They had learned from someone who had achieved legendary status while maintaining humility, who had been offered the highest honors while choosing to serve quietly, and who had demonstrated that the greatest strength often comes from the willingness to remain teachable regardless of one's achievements.